first, let's just unpack the fact that you've just dropped probably the most important lesson in life, which is that your body has intelligent design and it is constantly sending you signals.
Mm-hmm.
And when something shrinks you, depletes you, makes you feel like you're hiding, that is a hugely important signal to pay attention to. And one of the simple secrets in life is spend more time with people and doing experiences that expand you or energize you. And you also said something important. It has nothing to do with whether or not something is easy or something is difficult, and has everything to do with the kind of energy that you feel when you're either in that experience or you are with those people that are meant for you. And so that's number one, in terms of just such an important takeaway. And it took me a really fucking long time to realize that a lot of why my life was so hard is because I was spending time either with people that depleted me or in situations that depleted me or in a job that depleted me. And, I can remember like it was yesterday being 29 years old and being here in Boston, and we had just moved here and I could not get a job. I had been a public defender, working for legal aid in New York City straight out of law school. And then we moved to Boston for my husband to go to business school. And I was not a member of the bar, so I couldn't practice law in a courtroom. So the only job I could get was in a law firm, which is the exact opposite from walking into a courtroom and representing people. I was walking into a high rise and into an office and then sitting at a desk all day, researching and writing. I'm highly dyslexic. It's really hard for me to focus my brain that way. I would be sitting on that commuter rail with almost like a visceral hangover feeling of don't go. Like my whole body, when you're in a relationship or you're sleeping with somebody or you're walking into a job that doesn't feel right. And too many of us, and especially women, we stay in these situations like it's some kind of obligation to endure it or to fix somebody else so it feels better. And, I went into that job every single day for more than a year. And then I got pregnant, thank God, because while I was on maternity leave, I not only had massive postpartum depression, but when I finally got stabilized from the postpartum depression, I had this awakening that was visceral. I said to my husband, I can't go back to work. I cannot do it. The idea of walking in there now that I've been separated from it is making me physically ill. Mm-hmm. And then he said, well, no problem. We've just bought this house. We can't afford it unless you're working. So you got to go make $60,000. So now I had a problem. I had 4 weeks before I had to walk back into that job, and I had to find a job that made $60,000. And boy, did I get to work. And I think if you frame life change often, particularly like getting a job or like a problem to solve, sometimes it makes it easier to figure out how to solve it.
Some motivation to get by, even though getting by for one versus the other is totally different. I believe that we're stepping into an age where we're going to learn how to tap into our body and like really be able to sense truths and lies and indicators. We're just going to be more in touch physically with how our outside reality makes us feel to be a guide for us. I think that's what's going to be called of us in this day and age where we don't even know if we're watching the news and it's true or false. We don't know anything. What is real? What is not? Why is it? Why is it that we don't listen to those cues? We don't listen to that little voice inside that has that quick little, like, or like,
the answer's simple. You've been trained not to.
How? What is it that trains us not to?
Childhood.
What are the aspects that we overlook in our life that we do on a repetitive basis that go, not the body, not the intuition, out here?
You were trained as a child that if you did what your instincts told you to do, that you would get in trouble or somebody would be mad at you. Like that's how you parent children. Through threats and intimidation. I mean, come on, I'm a parent. Like that's how I just,
yeah, it worked for me.
But not really, because, as a kid, you want to keep the peace. You want to make sure that you're not, like it goes back to survival. You are hardwired to be part of a pack, and the pack that you're born into, for better or for worse, is the one that you're wired in your DNA to stay connected to. And so what happens is, we can talk about the range of having a household that's safe, where you're just worried about your mom being upset. You're just worried about dad not yelling. And it's all subconscious. You're just reading the cues. And so, all you want to do is dance and play. And that's what your intuition is telling you, and to play your records and to make, and so like, can you shut up? It's been, and so you learn to stop listening to what's in your heart and soul and to prioritize reading the cues. And then that only gets reinforced when you go to school, when it becomes part of your biological and your growth evolution to form friendships. And so your brain has this moment where it goes from accepting and loving you exactly as you are to suddenly your brain turns into the sorting hat from Harry Potter. And now you look around, and instead of seeing a world that you want to explore, you see the groups you belong to and the groups that you don't. And your mind is doing this as a way to protect you. It's all evolutionary stuff in terms of keeping you safe. And so instead of going to sit with the sports kids, or, the kids that look different than you, or the kids that are artsy, you start to go, oh, well, I can't go there because I don't have nice clothes. And I can't go there because I don't look like those kids. And I can't go there because, and you start to literally talk yourself out of following the pull of your heart. I can't possibly go out for the play because all the kids will, question my sexuality if I'm a guy. I can't possibly quit the football team because my dad is going to be pissed off at me. Life taught you to stop listening to your own instincts. And one of the greatest opportunities of your life as an adult, because once you're 18, you get to say, you have way more control than you think you do. You get to say what job you want to go and pursue. You get to say what you want to do for a living. You get to say who you're going to love and how you're going to live your life. And one of the greatest gifts of your adulthood is coming back home to yourself and learning how to remove the crap that has been put on top of your intuition, the anxiety, the people pleasing, the imposter syndrome, the penalties. There are some, like, let's take an example of somebody who grows up in a wildly conservative religious household who is gay. And being themselves means that your family kicks you out.
Yeah.
Your entire existence is something you're hiding. Your identity is what you're hiding, because the messaging at you and the consequences as a child were so severe. And so, people experience this. There's not a single adult who has not had life or abuse or trauma or some situation scream at you. You can't be you. It's not, or you got to change if you want me to like you. You got to change if you want mom to be happy. You got to not be totally yourself if you want dad to love you. And then if you've had issues like abandonment, or you've had issues like discrimination or abuse, the experience of those things makes you as a child question there's got to be something wrong with me. Because if there weren't something wrong with me, my father would still be here at the house. If there weren't something wrong with me, I wouldn't have been abused like this. This is sort of what the child brain does. It turns it back at you. And so this is what every adult needs to repair in order to tap back into the wisdom that is inside you and to hear what your intuition and your soul is trying to tell you. And the other reason why it's very hard for people to hear is because you're so busy. You're so busy running from one thing to the next. You're kind of on autopilot. You're doing this thing. You're not even present. And so it requires a slowing down. And that's one of the greatest gifts of the pandemic, I think, for a lot of people. That's why you're seeing the great resignation and so many people quitting their jobs. That's why you're seeing divorces skyrocket. That's why you're seeing people really have a reckoning with themselves about what's working, what's not working, because the pandemic hit the pause button and you didn't have anywhere that you could go. You couldn't run to Target or to get a cup of coffee with a friend in order to just be busy. You had to stay put.
Very, very well said. We could just stop there, and that's enough information for people to feast on and just like go with, right? Because there's two parts. The first is your familial situation. It's your upbringing. It's your childhood trauma and patterning. And then the other part is culture and, what your environment is and how everything is designed to distract you and take you out of your relationship with your inner self, your inner child, whatever it is that you want to call it. And place fear. I think that's been a big part of kind of this last couple of years is there's just so much fear propaganda or fear porn, as they would call it. It's just, it's crippling for so many people. So let's start with the first one, which I think is the one that we have control over both of them, but I think it's almost the hardest one. And that's your own programming from childhood. I mean, I'm fascinated with psychology and fascinated with why we are the way we are. And it's taken me into my late 30s to really get a grasp on sort of the patterns in my life showing up and the, childhood traumas that happen with mom, with dad, and what we're looking for to resolve, and then how we act ourselves. And it's all in the parents. And so, I think that's probably one of the most important things that I have dealt with personally is just taking a step forward into those realities. And maybe the most important thing my therapist said to me was that no one holds the keys. It was like, once I started unpacking it, it was like, I wanted to blame mom or dad, apologize, and then everything will be okay. And it's like, that doesn't make it okay. You have to come to terms with it. And once you do, you actually don't need them to do anything for you. But the truth of the matter is that our childhood plays an enormous role on how we act in the world and what we judge and what we end up projecting against and what triggers us.
I can give you an analogy. So I think it's really important when you decide that you're going to change your habits and change the patterns of behavior that make you feel stuck or that you can't stand anymore, that are the result of surviving trauma. You got to be compassionate with yourself and patient, because a great analogy for the patterns that you learned that you're now stuck with right now, it feels like as an adult, is this. You spent how many years as a race car driver?
27.
How many years? 27 years. Imagine if when you retired, I said, okay, you're going to play football now. And I expect you to be the best.
That's a tall order. I mean, that's an overwhelming proposal,
Yes. It's going to take years for you to learn a brand new sport.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to take small daily practice and studying and being patient with yourself to build new muscles and skills. And the truth is, you might never fully build new muscles and skills. It might never come easily or naturally, but over time, you could learn to be an excellent football player. But what you have to have compassion for is the fact that for the first 27 years, you were not playing football, you were driving a race car. And those are very different patterns. So if you're going to go from a situation where you have a pattern of withdrawing into yourself or lying or snapping at people or whatever your pattern is in response to uncertainty, it's literally the equivalent of teaching yourself to go from being a professional race car driver to a professional football player.
Foreign. Just
Two
feels foreign.
totally different skills, totally different neural pathways. And so when you kind of understand that you can do it, but it's going to take time. And I think one of the things that was the most eye-opening thing that I have ever learned was this. And I only learned this recently. One of the reasons why behavior change is so frustrating and it's so hard, and you got to use all these tools in order to trick your brain and to plow new neural pathways in and to form new habits. The reason why it's so hard is because when you and I are talking about changing our behavior, or we're talking about trauma pattern, or we're talking about the shit that we do that we want to change and we're really frustrated by, we're using the conscious part of our brain. We're using the prefrontal cortex. Talking about behavior change is easy to do. The reason why it's so difficult is you and I can sit here and talk about it, and we can make a plan for it. And we can say, okay, the next time that you're in a situation where your husband gives you that look, and then you start to worry that, blah, 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 blah is going to happen. And you feel the rage come up in your body. Like, what used to drive me bananas is my husband would ask me a ton of questions. And in my opinion, they're obvious, stupid questions. And so, I, of course, feel like a royal asshole now, because we've come to find out that my husband has been struggling with long-term depression. And one of the reasons why he has a brain, why his brain is so foggy is because of depression. And it didn't help that he was smoking a ton of weed all the time too. And so, I would literally get so frustrated because we'd be talking about something and he would be like, well, I don't know. What do you think? Like, just asking questions. And I'm like, you should know the answer to that. What? Have you heard of Google? Why are you asking me what the weather is going to be, tomorrow in Vermont? Fucking Google. And I'd go like, ah. And I hated that about myself. Hated it. And I would talk to my therapist. I can't snap at him. I don't want, I need to be more patient. This is what my mom did. Like, she would get frustrated with my father, and now I'm doing it with Chris, and I don't want to be that person. Oh my God. I would talk about this topic probably for years. And I would make a plan to be calm, and I'd make a plan to put myself in pause. And then the next day or two, I'd get back in my life, and we'd be standing there having a conversation. And he would ask me a question that I think he should have Googled or should know the answer to. And then the rage would come. And it wasn't until I learned the fact that I was talking about the behavior that I wanted to change with this part of my brain. But the rage and the impatience and the kind of like emotional reactiveness, that pattern is stored here in the basal ganglia. That pattern operates in my subconscious. And that pattern is not initiated by thinking. That pattern is initiated by emotions that rise up in the body. And it's only when you realize that the behavior change, particularly when it comes to generational patterns and trauma patterns, that in order to catch it, you've got to not only figure out the pattern you want to change, but you've got to figure out the situations and the emotions that you're feeling in your body that correspond to the pattern that you want to change. Because when I start to feel my ankles getting hot, I know that feeling in my body, that emotion of frustration, that is the trigger.